Do your muscles feel bound? I mean, really locked up. You'll often find your movements and range of motion is restricted, and no matter how much stretching or massage you do, that tightness still prevails. Well, chances are that you are vastly underutilizing one of the most important components to the human body. That being your fascial system. Your fascial system is a network of connective tissue that wraps around every single organ and muscle in your body, all the way from your head to your toes. It is the largest component of connective tissue in the body and makes upwards of 50% of the body's mass. Furthermore, your fascial system plays an integral part in regulating your nervous system and proprioception. It is one of the primary reasons as to why we can have a sense of body awareness, as it drives sensory information from our body to the brain through its web-like structure. So, how does this all relate to your body feeling tight? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because of the fascial system's deep connection to the nervous system, things like trauma, inflammation, repetitive movement patterns can create sticking points to its connective-like properties. Imagine with me two pieces of leather. If these two pieces of leather are well hydrated, they will present themselves as smooth to the touch and nearly frictionless when being rubbed together. However, if I continued to do this repeatedly, they would eventually begin to dry out, and there wouldn't be much of a fluid glide between them. This can and does happen in the body with your fascial system. As an example, if the body suffers a traumatizing injury, it will attempt to organize itself around that injury, and a compensation pattern may be created. If proper rehab isn't conducted, or worse yet, you stop moving that body part altogether, the tissues or that leather starts to dry out and that fluid glide is eventually lost. Typically, as a result of this, muscles, tendons, and ligaments have to kick themselves into overdrive, which further reinforces this sense of tightness, and we find ourselves in a pretty negative cycle. So how do we get out of this? Well, one of the most potent ways is to simply train your fascial system. Now, this can look a lot of different ways. So what we're gonna get into next is a few examples of fascial training exercises, as well as a few different core principles that you can apply to what it is that you are already doing. So something to keep in mind is how this elasticity or elastic tension is currently organized in your body. And that's why on this channel, we'll often spend some time in positions, trying to get a sense for where tension is, because we're trying to tap into that sense of body awareness and indirectly affecting our fascial network and the fascial system. So a simple higher level concept that you can start to employ right away is just trying to get in tune with where your body is in space and having this baseline of body awareness as you go through movement. So whether you're going through a dumbbell row, you're picking your child up, you're chucking a baseball, instead of just going through those motions, just try to first tune in to where is that motion being oriented from and where are you feeling sensation in your body. If you are someone who experiences tightness or pain or discomfort when you go through these types of motions, then chances are how the fascial network or how the muscles are kind of kinetically linking together may not be working in as efficient manner as it potentially should be. And that's why practicing positions that you commonly find yourself in or stimulus that you'll often face in a safe and controlled way is often a great place to start. A really easy example of this is a push-up. So here's what we're gonna do. You're gonna go down onto the floor in a all fours position to start with. You can either start from a high plank or a quad pad position, which is really just a kneeling push-up. And what you're going to do to start with is simply just go through the push-up. Go through 3 to 5 reps. Don't really try to tune in into anything. All I want you to try to do is just the motion. So I'll give you some time, go through those motions right now. So that's all done? Okay, sweet. You're gonna get back into the same position that you have comfortability in. So now we're in our all fours position, whether that be from your toes or your knees. But instead of just going through the motion, I want you to sense your palms into the floor and also your toes into the floor. Now, before you even go, think about drawing your hands down at the same time that you draw your feet up. So you're almost trying to sandwich yourself. And what you'll probably feel as you go through that is a general connection of tension through the front line of your body. Now see if you can sustain that as you go down into the push-up, or maybe increase the tension subtly. And then when you get to the bottom position, we're gonna inverse that. So you're gonna push your hands up towards the wall in front of you, feet are gonna go away, and you're gonna slowly drive yourself up. And this is gonna start to bring some sensation into the back line. So now are we not only influencing the muscles, but we're also starting to influence the fascial connections around them on the front and back side of our body. And this was simply all done through a cue and you just bringing awareness into different parts of your body. And this will have a massive influence on the sensation that is created in your body, as well as the fascial tensions and connections that are established as a result of it. Another awesome way that we can influence the fascial system, and is probably one of my personal favorites, is through some form of rhythm. So for this technique, you can grab yourself a dumbbell, a kettlebell, a water bottle, really anything that you can hold to your side that is gonna allow you to create some momentum and orient a rhythm around. Before you jump into this one, just make sure that you are comfortable going through a hinge position. I will post some videos here and here that you can go to work on your hinge. But if you feel that you're competent in a hinge, then we'll move right along. So for this one, we are gonna start in a bilateral position, or just our feet side by side. And all I want you to begin to do is swing the tool of your choice just to the outside of your body. And all I want you to get a feel for as you're going through this is just the general rhythm of kind of what's happening in your body and where you feel weight is being dispersed as you're going through it. So now we're starting to draw in some body awareness around this rhythm. We're starting to notice where tension is kind of coming in and out of our body very naturally, kind of as we're going through it. And what we're gonna start to do is just pick the momentum up a little bit more. So we're gonna create a little bit more of a pull down, a little bit more of a lift up. And that's just gonna generate more momentum, and we're gonna start to hang out there as we start to drop into a hinge. So now our body is beginning to dynamically orient itself around this rhythm. As we're going kind of back and forth, we're loading things like the hamstrings, the glutes, the upper body is connecting to that through rotation. And this is all organizing itself around that fundamental rhythm from the tool that we are using. And really what we are attempting to do here is kind of hold or maintain a baseline of tension, because we do want there to be some form of stability in the body, especially if there's a particular area that we find it's lacking. But we also don't want to be hanging on to tension as hard as we can, where we're creating a sense of rigidity. Ideally, there's a flow, there's a fluidity, there's a little bit of a bounce to our movement. When you look at anyone who moves really well, or any high-level athlete that moves really well, you're gonna see kind of this natural bounce in their movement. So how else can we affect the fascial system? Another one of my favorite ways to both affect the fascial system as well as the lymphatic system and kind of just get fluid more or less just flowing through the body and circulation really flowing is through jumping. Jumping is great because it's a very reflexive motion. As we're going through the jumping motion, we're more or less just kind of rebounding off the floor. And what I kind of envision as I'm going through this is that my feet are kind of like little springs. And they're kind of just acting like springs that are interacting with the floor that allows me to kind of get that elasticity and that bounce off the ground. Now we can even develop this a little bit further, adding a jump to a more dynamic movement. So what we'll get into now is a switch lunge. So this is definitely more of an advanced movement. If you aren't very comfortable in single leg work or lunge work, then you may want to spend some time there first before we start adding more dynamism to it. So starting in a split stance, we're gonna begin rotated over the lead leg. And what we're gonna do is attempt to drop down at the same time that we rotate into our opposing leg. Now, as we're dropping down, what I try to think is I'm receiving energy or momentum coming down, and then I'm gonna use that to spring myself back up and then counter rotate myself back to the starting position. You can work this just on the spot, kind of switching, lunging, popping back up. Or you can start to add almost a little bit of a matrix to it where you're turning yourself clockwise, or you start to rotate yourself back counterclockwise. I personally really love this exercise. It's an absolute leg killer, but it also still gives me that sense of springiness and dynamism and flow and just all the good things that we want to get out of exercise. I wasn't gonna throw this one in there, but I just love training the fascial system and I really love this tool. So let's get into it. We're gonna get into some lateral Bosu hops. So for this, you will need the specialized equipment, which is a Bosu, or if you can manage to make one yourself, you can hit up David Weck. Maybe he'll give you the patents as to how to create one of these awesome tools. So for this, we're gonna come back to our split stance position. We're gonna have the Bosu lined up against the wall. And what we're gonna use the Bosu as is just a form of reflex to kind of spring off of. And then we're gonna try to catch momentum back in that single leg position. What I would suggest here to start with is just getting used to kind of the springiness kind of coming off and on the Bosu. It does take a little bit of time to kind of get used to what the Bosu feels like, as well as what it feels like to kind of receive and catch momentum as you're coming off of it. But once you have the gist of kind of what that spring and that bounce kind of feels like, you can really start to ramp up momentum. And ideally, you can try to make this into one continuous motion. So as you can see on your screen here, as I kind of hit the Bosu and then spring away, I'm immediately thinking about going right back to the Bosu. At no point am I coming to a total dead stop. And this is all in an attempt, why is that so hard to say? This is all in an attempt to try to maintain that fluid and rhythmic nature to the motion. This will teach you a lot about where you load and carry weight as you start to move through this frontal plane of motion, which, by the way, is a plane of motion that you are probably not training enough. So get on some lateral Bosu hops. There are quite literally thousands of different ways to train your fascial system. It's a vast and far-reaching and also a developing approach. But for someone like me, it's something that gets me really excited about training. It changes the approach from this muscle with this joint at this origin to looking at the body in a more holistic and integrated way, which for someone like me makes a lot of intuitive sense when you start to look at the broad dynamics of movement. Anyways, I had an absolute blast making this video. This is really what my training and my style is all about, is kind of tinkering and playing with these different systems, trying to tune in to what they feel like. So if you're into that kind of thing and you want to get more in tune with your body, then you can go check out another video I did on the body on something related to the fascial system, probably in some way right here.